Welcome to Run, Build, Grow, the podcast that laces up its running shoes and dives deep into the heartbeat of the communal spirit of running. I'm your host, Andrew Ware, the Runnin' Rev, and I'm thrilled to take you on this exhilarating journey where we explore stories that go beyond the pavement. In this episode, I welcome in Jeff Van Horn from Lucky Road Run Shop in the Central Virginia area. Of course, you all are familiar with Lucky Road. They have been a sponsor here, helping to make this podcast possible. And Jeff is part of the reason that Lucky Road is who they are and what they do and how they seek to reach out and be a part of community. And you'll hear in this episode that it's not all about business for Jeff. He doesn't want to be that sleazy car salesman. He wants to be the guy who helps to bring people together and help them to know and understand how much of an impact running can make in their lives. But before we get into it, I'd like to shout out my partnership with Lucky Road Run Shop. Are you ready to run strong and feel great doing it? At Lucky Road Run Shop, they specialize in making every runner, walker, and fitness enthusiast get that perfect fit. Their trained staff takes the time to analyze your gait, your stride, and match you with the right shoe because the right fit changes everything. With top brands like Ultra, Asics, Brooks, Hoka, Mizuno, New Balance, On, Saucony, Topo, they carry the best gear to keep you moving comfortably mile after mile. Visit one of their Central Virginia locations and check them out at luckyroadrunshop.com because every step should feel like a lucky one. Lucky Road Run Shop, where the journey begins. So let's jump into this conversation with Jeff and hear a little bit more about his journey and what makes this run specialty space so awesome as a community partner. Welcome in, everybody. I'm joined by Jeff Van Horn of Lucky Road Run Shop. I knew I had to get Jeff on. I mean, I knew this was an opportunity to really learn and really experience. Jeff, how you doing today?
I'm a happy guy. How are you?
Doing well. Let's get started right at the top where we always get started. Jeff, what is your community and what makes your community awesome?
Well, obviously it's people. Just people that run or walk or just trying to lead a happy and healthy lifestyle. And then, of course, you've got people that are volunteering at a lot of different events, trying to come together and help each other. I think that's what makes a community great.
And as I mentioned at the top, Jeff is the owner, founder, like every single title that exists, along with his wife Desiree, of Lucky Road Run Shop in the Richmond, Central Virginia area. And so, Jeff, as an owner of a run specialty store, what does community mean to you?
What community means to me was just being a part of it all. Being actively involved and engaged in just helping people and again enjoy a happy and healthy lifestyle. But just have conversations with individuals that come to the store that we meet at events. Who are you? What are you trying to accomplish? What are your activities? What are you trying to accomplish with the activity? Do you have any injuries we should know about? We just do our best to try and help people, succeed at their goals in life.
I just wrote an article on my Substack the other day talking about this idea of like you are a runner and how for a lot of runners, it's not just claiming that title, but it's feeling like comfortable in that space. And I've even talked about on the podcast how good, proper equipment and the frequency of injuries can often be a hindrance to somebody feeling like they belong in running community or feeling like they can participate in running community. And listeners will remember when I had John Lamagda on and we talked a little bit about the run specialty scene, this idea of making sure that people are getting the right equipment, getting what they need in order to have a comfortable running experience. Can you talk a little bit about that process of helping runners of all varying degrees of running, whether that's their first pair of running shoes they're ever buying for themselves and their first miles training for their first race, or whether, they're like some of us crazies who are buying their 1,000th pair of shoes and training tens of thousands of miles. What are you doing as a run shop owner, as a run specialty store owner, as a manager, as a facilitator, to help ensure that any runner that's coming into your store is being cared for, is being looked after, knows that, you're going to help them make sure that they're having an enjoyable experience on the run?
Wow, that's a lot into one big question that you just threw out me. I mean, it comes down to the people that we have in our staff, or what we call family, Lucky Road family. When we interview, we're not necessarily trying to learn what someone knows about running or running shoes or anything to that matter. What we're trying to determine is what's in your heart. Are you genuinely a good person? Do you care about, helping others, trying to do your best to help someone else? Because I can't teach people to be kind. I can teach them everything they need to know about anatomy, physiology, sports medicine, biomechanics, how running shoes affect all of that. But if the person's not kind to begin with, they're not going to make it at Lucky Road. And I hate to say this, but I was a little thrown back a few years ago when and it was a very enlightening experience for me. Enlightening. The Running Industry Association created a diversity coalition. And I remember, one of the first conversations I had with them, they were trying to convince me that racism exists in the Run Specialty channel. I'm like, no, it doesn't. It's one of the most open and welcoming communities around. Unfortunately, I was wrong about that. And I learned the hard way that I actually had some people on my staff that if you were a person of color, or if you weren't necessarily what they deemed to be a real runner, they didn't give you the gold medal red carpet service that we're accustomed to giving everybody that comes in. We're supposed to be able to look at every single person that comes in as a unique individual and spend time getting to know them, who they are, their activities, their goals, their injury history, spend time observing their foot structure and how their body moves, and then take the time to explain to that individual, hey, this is what you're doing, and these are your unique needs. And that way we develop a personal relationship, and create an experience for that client that makes them want to come back, or we create what I lovingly refer to as a CFL, or customer for life.
Yeah. I want to say, like, the first time I ever went into a Lucky Road, it was, I'm pretty sure it was you that helped me. And the welcoming nature of that, and I appreciate your honesty in that sort of, confrontation of seeing that, hey, maybe this industry isn't as welcoming as it should be, and then finding ways within your own structure, within your own ability, to make sure that you're being inclusive to everybody. And I kind of, they always say, when you're getting running shoes, like I'm a Brooks guy. Like, I've worn Brooks forever. I can kind of dabble in other running brands, and I've done it. But when someone asks me, like, well, what's the best kind of running shoe? You got to be quick to say, it's like, well, I mean, this is what works for me and my feet or my body. You talked a little bit about how important that is, but focusing on the person and their individual needs. I want to dive into maybe how that developed and where that came from, looking back as you got into the running industry. What inspired you to want to be that running store that really cares about each individual?
Well, that's also a great question. You're going to keep me on my toes today, that's for sure. What inspired me? Well, I'm going to go way back in time. I think it was when I was in college, on a break, visiting my home where my parents lived in northern New Jersey at the time. I was hanging out with tossing a football with my best friend, Connor Ward, in the backyard. And we're just like throwing out all these crazy ideas of things that we might want to do in the future. And quite honestly, we came up with an idea of like, man, wouldn't it be great? And this is the early 1980s, where, wouldn't it be great if we created a store that specializes in running shoes? And we'd be able to, go to all the different schools and the colleges and all the different races, and just help people that really want to have, good running shoes. And honestly, that conversation, I mean, it didn't go anywhere for a couple, like, 10, 15, 20 years. But it was always in the back of my mind. And everywhere I went, if we were traveling, I was always checking out, whatever the local stores were, and seeing what they had for running, and just talking to people and getting to know things, and taking notes. I drove my, slash girlfriend slash fiance wife in the past, crazy, because my thing is, wherever we went, I'm like, hey, I'm going to go check out the local sneaker shops, and see what's going on there. I think the other thing that came to light for me was that I was a very avid runner. I was very passionate about trying to be as good as I could, and I came from an era where a day off is lost. Rest is a 4-letter word. If you're not training hard, you're falling behind. And I had a tendency to overtrain, and I probably experienced every running injury you could possibly imagine. But back in the day, the medical professionals did not understand, and were not able to explain or treat effectively running-related injuries. They didn't understand that contact sport injuries don't treatment of contact sport injuries don't apply to endurance athlete injuries. So I was a little dismayed as an injured athlete myself, kind of being treated like a piece of meat, or talked over or talked down to by medical professionals that didn't understand what they were doing. And so I went to school and got a degree in sports medicine myself, and I focused on the running related injuries. And so the concept of being passionate for running, wanting to help people overcome their injury issues, and of course being my own boss, it just kind of came to fruition for me that I got to blend all three of those things together. And to me, I'm just so friggin' happy that I can do something I'm passionate about, and tied all that together. And I get to help people, and I meet new people every single day. And it is such a sense of fulfillment for me to be able to help them overcome their challenges, and achieve success in their goals in life.
And for you, what is the importance behind a running store being embedded within a community? We talk about Lucky Road is a Central Virginia fixture. You guys have all these locations across Central Virginia, across the Richmond metro area, and you're synonymous with Richmond, and a lot of folks know you, and you're working with clubs. What becomes the important part for these run specialty stores to be embedded in their communities, to understand the run groups, the run clubs, the running scene? How important is that for you all?
It's very important. And it brings to mind a concept that maybe not so understood, but trust. Trust is a huge part of what we do, because we have competition. These big national chains that have stores all over the country will carry our product, but when I've gone in and visited and tried to ask questions, I find that some of these people might be knowledgeable in terms of the product, but when it comes to understanding how that product is going to apply to the unique needs of an individual, they don't have that training. And I think the majority of consumers out there, they don't understand that not all stores are the same. So how we at Lucky Road try to separate ourselves is to make sure that our staff is optimally trained in the areas of anatomy, physiology, biomechanics, how running or walking shoes can affect normal and abnormal gait. So what we're trying to do for our community is instill a sense of trust that no matter what your needs are, no matter who you are and what your needs are, if you come to us, we're going to give you our absolute best effort, because the truth of it is that injured athletes do not buy running shoes.
Very true.
And so our goal is not to fling product at people to see what sticks. Our goal is to do what's in the best interest of that client. And some days that means not having them buy something.
Mm-hmm.
There's plenty of times that people come in with an injury, and honestly, it was, just a couple of days ago, a young lady came in. She's at the University of Richmond right now. She's experienced all kinds of shin pain, and we were able to establish that it was not an issue with her shoes. It really had more to do with the fact that she didn't know how to tie her shoes.
Mm-hmm.
So by teaching her how to properly tie her shoes and teaching her how to use a foam roller that she already owns, we were able to solve her injury issue without her having to spend any money.
Yeah, and if y'all want a good time, follow Jeff and Lucky Road on Instagram and Facebook. I mean, I can give that shout out all the time. Jeff will occasionally post these great little stories about people who come into Lucky Road and their experiences, and I mean, you want to hear the weird oddities of the running shoe industry and how all these things are made and how they affect people. It's something that you go into detail with, and I think I see that it's something that helps you stand out, that helps make you known around the area as people who have experience. And I even think about I walk into my run club's brewery, and I can walk in and I see all of the brewers who have their Cicerone training, and they've been trained in different kinds of beer, and they've tasted all these different things, and they've gone through all these classes. And you can't necessarily put a lot of that stuff up in the run shop, but not to expose industry secrets or anything. But this seems like something that, as we're looking at running community, having people in the running community, whether they work at specialty stores or not, having people who kind of understand these things can be really vital, because they can help to be that source of knowledge and insight. And so what are the things that you do when you're training new staff, when you're helping them to understand, when you're teaching them how to work with customers, how to pair them with shoes, even how to pair them with brands that might be better for them versus other brands?
Well, it's, again, a great question. We're not necessarily brand conscious, because every individual is unique and all their needs are unique to them. So the basics of training someone to do this job, it comes down to, are you truly vested in trying to help others? And if the answer to that is yes, then we've got something we can work with. Unfortunately, some people are just looking for a paycheck. I had one person apply for a job because he heard we get discounts at local races. I'm like, no, that's not a reason to want to work here. We have to be passionate about trying to help others. So, but we do our best to go over very basics of anatomy and physiology. What we also call foot morphology, which is basic shape and structure of a foot, how that matches up to the basic shape and structure of different shoes. So the fit of a shoe is extremely important. I've seen plenty of people trying to jam their foot into shoes that just have absolutely there's no connection at all. And I refer to that that little toy that we had as kids with the different shaped pegs and the different shaped holes, and how a square peg fits a square hole better than it fits a round hole. Feet and shoes are kind of like that too. So getting the fit to be accurate is one of the most important things that we try to teach somebody. But from there, we try to also teach the nuances of gait or biomechanics, how the lower limb and starting with the lower limb, but then work our way up to observing the entire body, because it's not just the foot, it's also the shin, the knees, the hips, the arm swing, shoulder balance. We're trying to identify symmetry in the gait. I think there's too much focus on the concept of pronation, and we want not just our staff but also our clients, our community, to understand that pronation is not a bad thing. In fact, pronation is the foot's natural mechanism of shock absorption. Without pronation, the foot's going to hit the ground with upwards of 1.5 to 2 or even 2.5 times body weight ground reaction force. Without pronation absorbing or dispersing that impact, that's going to travel up the kinetic chain. That's going to bother shins, knees, hips, low back. So we want pronation to occur, and everyone's degree of pronation is unique to them. And so we try to teach our staff, our Lucky Road family, how to identify the variables of pronation. and what it means to that specific individual. And the biggest question that we can ask anyone is, are you in pain? Because no matter what we see in the degree of pronation of that individual, if they're not in pain, there's nothing to fix. And this is where we as an industry run into trouble and actually cause harm if we're not being careful. Because all too often, the our industry is looking at any movement and thinking, oh, that's pronation, that's bad, we need to stop it. And they end up selling that person shoes and insoles that actually inhibit their natural degree of pronation, and that individual, that client ends up with an injury as a result of the information that was provided them about their gait that was not accurate. So I see people all the time. I mean, it's sad, but I see people all the time that have been told, oh, you're overpronating. You need the most supportive shoes and these insoles and calf sleeves and all this bracing stuff. And it actually interferes with their ability to run effectively that's unique to them. And they end up injured because of it. And I have to take a look at it and go, well, let's just strip away all this support and get you back into a neutral pair of running shoes that you were using pain-free to begin with. And we solve their issues. As an example, years ago, before I got married and had kids, I read a case study on running in injuries in runners of different cultures and in different countries. So, who do you think what cultures or what countries do you think had the most injuries in their youth runners?
Oh gosh. I mean, I'm going to have to just go ahead and guess the United States.
United States and England and what would be considered advanced civilization, right?
Yeah.
Who do you think had the least amount of running injuries in their youth?
I mean, I'm just going to bite the carrot and say probably Africa.
Yeah, so like places like Kenya, and what they attribute, at least the summary of this case study, and again, this is going back at least 30 years ago. I think I read this. They attributed it to the footwear. So here in the United States and the so-called civilized nations, as soon as we have kids born, they're being put in these shoes, these boxes, and then the boxes don't get changed out until the foot grows and starts splitting the seams. And that has an adverse effect on the natural growth of our feet. So in the so-called lesser advanced nations where kids are allowed to run barefoot, and the foot develops more naturally, it becomes stronger and is more resistant to injury. In my home and yard, which is an environment I could control, we went barefoot as often as possible. The only time we put shoes on is when we were going out or leaving the house. And so my kids, both of them, their feet developed naturally. Now, if we were to take both of my kids and put them on treadmills and start drawing all the lines down the back of the leg, every single person in this industry would be aghast at what they saw to be what would be deemed overpronation. And they wouldn't be wrong, because the degree at which both their feet move, it does pronate beyond what would be considered the sagittal plane or the midline. And the immediate thought process is going to be, oh, we need to get them into some stability or supportive shoes with some supportive insoles. But here's the reality. Because their feet develop naturally, they're strong. So even though it looks like they're overpronating, that's their neutral. That's where their foot becomes a rigid lever and propels off the ground evenly. That's their level of efficiency. And it would be wrong, even though it doesn't look right, it would be wrong of me to try and put them in supportive shoes, because it would be interfering with their foot's natural degree of pronation.
Well, and I wonder how much that pronation to injury, right? The pain that is caused by that. When someone has a running shoe that is working against them and stuff like that, at least from your perspective, how much do you see that affecting people's desire to be involved in running and to be involved in the greater running community?
Well, if you're injured, you can't run. If you can't run, then there's a certain level of depression that sets in. And this is one of the things that I noticed when not only being an injured athlete myself, If things aren't adequately explained to me, I'm not going to see light at the end of the tunnel, and I'm going to be in this dark place, not knowing why am I injured? What do I have to do to get over this? So I worked for a few years in the 90s in a clinical setting as an athletic trainer at a high school. And in all the different sports that I worked with, one of the things that I made a point to do was take that athlete and explain to them, hey, this is what's happened to you. This is why you're injured.
Mm.
These are the steps that we're going to take together, and we're going to work on this together. But these are the steps that we're going to take to help get you healthy. And these are the steps we're going to take. These are the things that we're going to do to help prevent this from happening again. Now the athlete sees light at the end of the tunnel. They're emotionally engaged. And when you can do that, then they're much more likely, the motivation to get healthy is there. And I think it helps aid and speed the recovery process if the person is educated and emotionally engaged in the whole process. So like I said before, injured athletes, they don't buy shoes. And so it doesn't do me any good to just fling product at people and see what sticks. I want to make sure that that it's actually appropriate, that it's working. I tell people all the time, hey, if you get an opportunity, stop back in or just give me a call or a note and just let me know how you're doing. Because if this isn't working for you, then we need to try something else. I want you to be happy. We have a vested interest in the success of our clients. So yeah, taking the time to really get to know people, identify their needs, share information, have real conversations, and sometimes it doesn't even have to be about running. It could be about anything. I mean, I meet plenty of people in our store that are like, "Hey, I'm not a runner. I'm just taking the kids to Disney, and I'm going to be on my feet all day." So those are great clients too.
Yeah, and even to hear like the vested interest in the success, it's not even just that they come back and they're repeat customers coming and buying the shoes, but it's also I can imagine having been in your stores, having experienced that, also knowing the vested interest that people have in continuing to run, continuing to have this movement be an active part of their lifestyle. And so when you're looking at that, what also then is, how are you also getting involved with run clubs, with groups around the area? What are you looking at when you're getting involved with larger groups of people where it's not the one-on-one interaction that you're having when somebody's coming and buying shoes, but how are you getting out in the community and being a part of clubs that are meeting on a weekly basis? Or we've talked about it, how you're involved with some of the local races out there. What is your role when you're doing things like that?
Just support. Our position is we don't feel the need to reinvent the wheel. There are so many running groups and activities here in Richmond and Fredericksburg that there's something going on. There's a group of people meeting almost every single morning and every single evening, every day of the week. So we don't have to go out and try to invent that or compete with anybody. Our objective is just to support what already exists. So we do have some groups that meet at the stores, like Monday evenings. We help, and Saturday mornings we have occasional events at the store. But in many cases, we're just supporting the Richmond Roadrunners Club, the Fredericksburg Area Running Club, the Effect Run Club. Let's see, the River City Run Club. I mean, there's just so many out there, and it's just a matter of just trying to stay in touch. If they have a need, we're here to help. With a lot of the races, we do sponsorship agreements. Sometimes it's in kind with gift certificate awards. So a lot of the events will help with the marketing of that event. I think that there's some type of motivation if someone knows that they could win an age group award with and earn or win a gift certificate to Lucky Road for free merchandise. That's definitely enticing to some people. But yeah, just to make sure that everyone knows we're available. You can talk to us. You can talk to us about anything. We're very open. And if we can help in any way, we will.
And so that's kind of, on the local community side. And we've talked a lot about, the individual runner. And I've always found it interesting in this run specialty industry how everything kind of meshes together. at the top it meshes together, and the trickle down effect is often how we runners experience the sport of running. And so kind of the last area that I really wanted to explore is conversations that you and I have had, a lot in, whether it's been recent months or just all the time, is what it's like and how you're investing in the brands. Like, how are you determining yourself, what works for what Lucky Road is offering to folks? I know that y'all have made some difficult decisions over the years in terms of how you're working with different brands, but even more so, how, like you said, you're not trying to brand specific someone, you're trying to shoe specific someone. And so even when you're working with brands and you're thinking about how you're carrying shoes, which shoes you're carrying, even which shoes you need to order more of because you notice that you need more of them. How are you making those decisions, and what's going into those decisions?
Great question. Yeah. So what I can tell you is the tough decisions are, a lot of it's through trial and error. We will bring in a brand. The manufacturers obviously will make a variety of different shoes. It's up to us to actually test those shoes. So, we try them on ourselves. We test run them. Then, after identifying unique needs with an individual, we ask them if they'll, put the shoes on, and we observe how that shoe is affecting that person's unique needs. And then we have to, come to our own conclusions about whether, those shoes are actually working the way they're supposed to. So sometimes, we'll find a shoe that has, specific design flaws in it. To give you an example, VCU, at one time, VCU's track and field program had a 50% injury rate. So the coach reached out to me, and we were able to spend some time with the athletes, and I identified two main reasons why all these athletes are having these problems. The first one was there was a contractual obligation to, because of sponsorship dollars to the university, there was a contractual obligation to wearing a specific shoe that flexed in the arch. And the arch is where the foot needs the most support. That's where the shoe itself should have a much more solid midfoot and good ground contact underneath the medial longitudinal arch. Well, these shoes that all these athletes are being told they have to wear because of a sponsorship agreement, we're all flexing in the arch and creating a very unstable platform. So once we got that resolved, saw the injury rates go down. But the number two reason why these athletes were having such trouble staying healthy is no one ever taught them how to tie their shoes. So once we spent some time with the athletes, teaching them how to tap their heel back in the shoe, how to adjust the laces, how to cinch everything down and get the shoe fitting just right. And it's equally important to untie the shoe before you take it off, because if you just force your foot out of the shoe, it stretches the upper and damages, and it breaks down faster. Their injury rates went to almost nothing. And so that taking the time to go through all of that with an athlete is it's important. But we identified a flaw, and in that particular company, it was a repeated flaw. In other words, it was happening over and over again. And so in terms of having conversations with executives at that company, they basically told me, 90% of our shoes are for fashion. So we're not in the business of making run specific or performance shoes. And it just didn't sit well with me. And it's like, well, but people are getting injured. And they're like, yeah, we know people are injured. And I was floored when they said, but we don't care. And that's when you realized I can't put my reputation behind this. So we stopped carrying that company's product and canceled our account with them. So we've got, we try to put our resources into certain brands that we know are dedicated to the Run Specialty channel. So it's the concept of reciprocity. If we know they're committed to helping us, we're going to definitely throw our support behind them. But sometimes we do have to have hard conversations. It's been a couple of years now, but some of the manufacturers, the reps would come to us and say, hey, we've got this great product. It does all these great things. And I would have to look at them, go, well, are you actually putting the shoes on people's feet and observing the results? And they're like, well, no, this is, our results are from computer generated, computer generated concepts. And I'm like, well, we're putting the shoes on people's feet and watching the results, and they're not working. These shoes are not working the way you're telling us. So in a couple of cases, the manufacturers would come back to me 6 months later and go, yeah, you're right. We did the real world testing you suggested, and it turns out those shoes aren't working the way you said or we said they were. So, and then they would make the appropriate adjustments, and then we'd start getting product that really does work. Nowadays, compared to 20 plus years ago, things are very different. I think there's no question that product is definitely improved. We've got much better options, much greater variety, which allows us to do a better job of fitting people. But I do remember, there was a time, and I'm not going to name names, but there was a time that I used to get invited up and spend time with different manufacturers, and they would ask my opinion of things, and I'd give you my best advice on stuff. But I do remember one specifically that didn't go so well. They were talking about a new shoe that they were going to create, and granted, a few years earlier, we were going over why some of their product just wasn't working right. And I was able to point out to them that, if, these particular stability models, you just had the support features in the wrong place. You just kind of need to move them up. And it's based on, the degree at which the foot rolls and where pronation forces actually occur. And so, a year later, they came back and said, hey, we've made these adjustments. And then the next thing you know, the product is working really well. Well, that, was probably about 7 years after that. I'm up there again having this conversation, and they're talking about a brand new shoe that they're going to create, and it's going to be super expensive, and they're putting all these bells and whistles in it. And I'm like, yeah, but the post is in the rear foot. Why are you putting the support structure in the rear foot? And their biomechanist was like, well, we have to lock in the subtalar joint. And I was like, well, wait a minute. We've known for 40 years that the subtalar joint does not unlock. Why are you trying to create a shoe to prevent something that we know doesn't happen? And of course, that's the whole thing got shut down. I was asked to wait till later and bring it up, blah, blah, blah. And anyway, I never got asked back again. And they ended up rolling out that shoe, and it ended up being a miserable flop. And I don't even think they make it anymore. So, yeah, I mean, it's a great question. It's like, how do we make these decisions? Well, it's trial and error. We have to study the concepts. We have to apply what we learn, and we have to make observations and see if things actually do work the way they're supposed to. And if they do, great. Then we can say with all confidence, hey, we're willing to put our reputation behind these specific product, these specific shoes, or we realize that something's not working the way it's supposed to, and we just stop ordering it, and we report back to the manufacturer that, hey, this doesn't work the way you told us, so we're not going to order anymore.
I think that's great, and gives us a bit of an inside, look at where a lot of this comes from. And it's not just, staking your business model, staking your reputation, but also in doing good for the running community, because especially with how expensive running shoes can be, especially in our modern day and age, there's something to be said that I can go to my local run store, my local run specialty store, and to me, I want to know that they've done their due diligence, because they've thought about every runner that's coming in there, that's going to be getting a shoe, that's going to be training for these races, that's going to be getting ready. And it's not just trying to sell, whether it's sell the latest flashy model to people or to sell something that's actually going to work for my foot. Because I had a PT session the other day and was kind of going through the introductory evaluation stuff. And the PT guy was looking at my feet and just like walking around trying to get an understanding of why my body hates me and everything. But notices something that I've always known, which is that my left foot sits flatter than my right foot when I'm just like standing around. But when I start moving, the quicker I move, and so as I'm walking, it pronates in, but when I run, it doesn't pronate in, and kind of noticing a lot of those different things. And so as even he is evaluating the running shoes that I have, he's looking at those with that understanding in mind, and is even giving me comments on like, okay, I can see why you chose these shoes or why they helped you to decide to get these shoes. And even in looking at the video, and to know that is part of the process as y'all are determining not just brands to work on, but I mean, and I don't know how often this happens, but even like a brand brings you a shoe, like you said, a new shoe in their lineup, and you're like, I don't think this is going to work for one reason or another. To me, I think that that's kind of a big thing to say. Not only do you care about your business line, not only do you care about your reputation as a run store, but I think in caring about those things as a run specialty store, to me, it often also says like, we care about our customers. We don't want them to get injured. We want them to be running. And as weird as it sounds, like the more they buy running shoes, not only the more they help us, but we know the more they've built up the community around us as well. Because, when you have happy runners, they invest in the community. They invest in the store that has helped them learn and grow. And I think, that's one of the things that we look at in running communities. And I think why running communities form around run specialty stores. And I don't know if that's your experience in seeing that at Lucky Road.
Well, yeah, it does. Absolutely. Because we want to be the focal point of the running community. We want people to know that when they come to us, they can trust us to give them our best effort. Like I said before, injured runners don't buy shoes, and if we're going to be successful,
and they're not happy about it.
No, and they're not happy about it, and they're going to go somewhere else. If somebody thinks that we've lied to them or we've misled them or deceived them in any way, they're never coming back. And so any good relationship, whether it's running shoes or it's a marriage, every good relationship has to be built on trust. So like when manufacturers come to us with new product, I don't just drink the Kool-Aid. I ask very specific questions. I try to take things apart. I look at every aspect of that shoe or that product and try to determine if it meets my standards and the standards that I'm willing to put my reputation behind. Because if it doesn't, then I've got a problem. Now, there have been occasions when, occasionally I'm the egotistical here. I can think of one specifically where I was dead wrong about something. And it really was when the Brooks Running Company decided to make a wholesale change to their support shoes and get rid of medial posts and put in these guide rails. Well, I've seen this application before, and it was a miserable failure. And I was the first person to go, no, you can't. No, please don't do this. This is like one of your best shoes, and you're going to destroy it by taking the post out and putting the guide rails in. And so we ordered light. Well, I was wrong. Brooks found a way to perfect that guide rail system, and the shoes actually worked perfectly. And so I had to swallow my pride a little bit on that one because I was wrong. And we've done a much better job with fitting people with Brooks stability models because now we have confidence. We know that it works.
And it kind of changed some folks from their stability models to their neutral models. And, some of us are a little happier for that one.
Well, it's funny you should say that because honestly, the stability class has been pushed on people far too much.
Yeah.
And roughly half the population wearing stability shoes don't need them. And I meet people every single day that are having injury issues because of overcorrection. A shoe or insole's functions are interfering with the foot's natural function, and then the like you were talking earlier, is like why do my shoes hate me? Why does my body hate me? Well, because you're fighting your shoe. The shoe's preventing you from doing what you're supposed to be doing naturally, and then you end up with an injury issue. So when I started in the industry, we were told that the wet test or the archetype theory was the best way to fit people, identify needs and fit people for shoes. And the concept is you put your foot in water, step on a dry surface. It gives you an imprint and tells you whether you have a high, medium, or low arch. And then it'll tell you what shoe you should fall into. Well, after studying, biomechanics and gait analysis and making observations, I started to recognize people aren't falling into these nice, neat little boxes, and it is not matching up real well. So in researching it, I learned that this concept first appeared in Runner's World magazine back in the spring of 1986. But the article had no author, there were no references and no footnotes, nothing to substantiate this allegedly scientific method of picking out running shoes. So we conducted a little bit of a case study and assessed over 2,400 people, categorized them as high, medium, low arch, watch them run in an ASICS racing flat, and then graphed the degree of pronation that we saw. And what we learned was that while stability models were being sold 70% of the time, honestly, less than 30% of the population needed a stability shoe. One of the things that we got from, over 70% of us actually are demonstrating a neutral gait and don't need all that extra support. One of the other cool things that we learned through that, and were able to make a significant change in the running shoe industry, was we identified that of the population with flat feet, 85% demonstrated a neutral gait. Now, 25 years ago, it was commonly believed, and unfortunately, some people still believe it, that if you're a natural flat foot, you're overpronating, you need the most support you can get. Well, that was actually false. The problem was there were no shoes designed for people with a flat foot that had a neutral gait. So we were able to go to the manufacturers and demonstrate to them that there's a niche in the market or there's a void in the market that's not being covered. And we helped them create a shoe or a category of shoe called straight lasted neutral. So in 2003, Brooks created a shoe called the Dyad, which is more closely resembles the Ghost Max, closely resembles that now. In 2005, New Balance created a shoe. It's currently called the 840. In a few months, that's going to be changed over, and they're going to call it the More. In 2008, I got a call from the designers at Saucony. Told me they were going to create one called the Echelon. So, we've got a really good variety of shoes now available to us that are designed for people with a very neutral, flat foot. And so we do a lot of business with them. We have a lot of people in that category. But as far as the wet test goes, we learned that it's not accurate. It's probably one of the worst ways to pick out a pair of shoes. And in terms of having conversations with the editors at Runner's World magazine, they reluctantly admitted they know it doesn't work. So my question was, why do you keep publishing it then as a viable method for picking out running shoes? Well, they had a back office business arrangement. How they described it was a back office business agreement with a mail order catalog company out of California. So they were being paid to put that out there because a business partner sells shoes based on whether you have a high, medium, low arch. But it literally is one of the worst ways to pick out running shoes. It is not accurate at all. The wet test is fake. It does not work. It's advertising. That's it.
Well, and I mean, I had to laugh, when you started talking about the guide rails, because, I was someone, I never say that I was incorrectly, gated with overpronation and then put in stability shoes. Because I ran comfortably for a decade in Brooks Adrenalines, and, they were comfortable. They worked for me. I really was not that injured when I had them. And then I remember in 2019.
That injured? Is that a level?
So this is one of the things I qualify with Friends of My Running Club. None of the injuries were shoe related. They were all okay. They were all stupidity related. Like, you roll an ankle because you step in a hole on the cross country course, or
well, yeah. No, just sorry to give you a hard time about that, but I'm like, I wasn't really that injured. I'm like, well,
no, I have my stupid injuries, and then I have my running related injuries, and most of my running related injuries are even just overuse. But I remember, in 2019. And you going into the store and just coming in, and weirdly, I'd gotten these pair of Adrenalines. I've been running in Adrenalines for, over 10 years, and coming in, and, you and I both know him, Troy Unger, who is the store manager at the Midlothian location. We're just talking. He's like, well, that Brooks completely changed up how they're doing support shoes, and they put in these guardrails. Let's toss you in a pair. He did the whole gait test and everything like that. He's like, let's toss you in a pair of Ghosts and see how your foot reacts to a neutral gait. And so puts me in them again, felt great in the store. And this is where I always give thanks for stores that offer kind of, let me go and put 20 miles or so on a pair of shoes. Yes. But I mean, put them on in the store. He's like, how do they feel? I'm like, they're comfortable. They feel great. He's like, all right. He's like, buy them and then, take them out, run with them at Run Club for the next few weeks, and, tell me how they feel. Went away and, felt great. you know, come to find out, it really was just kind of that change in how the support shoes were structured. And again, you know, that that is an opportunity that I think for me was appreciative at Lucky Road, but also like seeing run specialty stores being able to respond in that way to people who come in and say, hey, this shoe feels different. And having knowledgeable people, I think this is such an important thing for running communities to have run specialty stores that are knowledgeable, to have a place they can go to hop in and say, I've got this shoe and it feels kind of funky. And I think I saw one time that like the woman was having a problem like with her pinky toe, and like the shoelace was like a millimeter off on a pair of shoes, and it was like causing like an abrasion and like I mean, like who?
No, that's a true story.
No, fact, I remember reading it from you.
Yeah, it was an Asics shoe called the Cumulus, and it was been a few years now. But the thing that a lot of people don't recognize or realize is that not all the same shoes are made in the same factory. So depending on what the settings are for you have the exact same style number, exact same size, exact same color, everything. But the stitching on the lacing system was like 2 or 3 millimeters forward for the ones that she originally had that worked great, and then the ones that she did get. It was just off by a couple millimeters, and it rubbed a sore spot on the top of her foot. So I had to go through all the boxes that we had of that Cumulus in her size to find the one where the lacing system matched up a little bit better and didn't cause that rubbing. And you talk a little bit more about the another example about the Brooks Adrenaline. I had a true story. An older gentleman came in. It was very, very stern. He was on a mission. He knew what he wanted. He didn't want to have a conversation with me about anything. He was like, just get me the adrenaline. It's what I always get. I'm like, okay, great. And had him test run the shoe. And he was, up and back on our indoor track surface. And I asked him, I said, hey, listen, as a favor, I know you're not interested in, having a conversation basically. And I said, but as a favor to me, would you try on this Brooks Ghost? It's basically the same shoe, but without all the extra support. Because that was the other thing. He came in, he goes, oh no, I've done all my research and blah, blah, blah. And he was convinced that, the Adrenaline was his shoe, right? So I asked him, well, just to humor me, would you mind trying on this Brooks Ghost? And so he reluctantly agreed, and he test ran the shoe, and about halfway, down the track that's in the store, he goes, oh my God, my knee pain's gone. And so then I had his attention, and I was able to take a little bit of time with him and explain, what pronation is, how the foot functions, and how it affects the shin and the knee and the hip, and explain to him that he did in fact actually have a neutral gait, and by running in stability shoes all those years, it was affecting the stress to his knee joint. And so by getting him into a neutral shoe, all of a sudden his knee pain, his years long knee pain was gone.
Yeah. I mean, and it is like stories. And again, I think this is such a crucial part of running community, because there is an attention to the people who are a part of the community. I mean, I can even think of our run store down here of, I was looking for a max cushion shoe. Like I just wanted something that I could beat up for lots of miles and kept my foot somewhat from, getting beat up in a lot of those miles. And remember trying, I'd had a bunch of folks who had talked about, Hokas and how great Hokas were in terms of, supporting the foot and offering the cushioning. I get them, and man, that sidewall, if that thing doesn't just like go straight up to my shin, and how the foot responds to a running shoe is one thing, but having a place where you can go in your running community that helps you to understand that is another, right? I can just go to a running store, and I've tried it multiple times in my life. And folks, Jeff has gotten on me about doing this, of just walking into a running store and saying like, all right, give me my pair of Ghosts. Let's go. And what is it? It's always, nope, I need you to try these on right here in the store. I want you to like run up and down, make sure they're comfortable, make sure you feel great. Even the follow-up of, hey, how do they feel? Like, how are they fitting? All of those things. Those are the kinds of things that help us make sure that, hey, it can be an expensive sport, unfortunately, right? But how are we making the expense accessible to folks? And
Well, try to compare the expense of running to something like soccer or hockey
yeah,
or all these other sports that require a boatload of equipment. Honestly, to be a runner, all you need is a good pair of shoes and socks and shorts and top, and then the world's open to you.
well, yeah.
And, yeah, and the majority of our clients, honestly, we see twice a year. Shoes last approximately, 400 miles, give or take some. The average person does that about every 6 miles. I mean,
Mhm.
every 6 months. And so, in comparison, I think running is a relatively inexpensive sport when you think about all the other sports out there. Um,
Well, and even when you talk about the expense of shoes, right? And so you want to make sure that, if you're going to be investing in this sport, if I'm going to buy a pair of shoes that I can put 400 miles in, there's a sense that when I go to that place, that pair of shoes is going to be a good pair of shoes for me. It's going to last me those
yeah.
400 miles.
Well, it also plays into people's preconceived notions about what a good fit is, and this is something we see every single day, especially with new clients. They don't recognize that their shoes are too small or too narrow or too anything for that matter, and they've got a certain perception in their mind about how shoes fit and what they deem to be comfortable to them, until we explain, hey, you see that lump on the side of your foot? Yeah, that's your toe pushing out over the side of the shoe. That's not good. That should be smooth. Um, or hey, I want to teach you how to actually tie the shoe. All right, you see how the lacing system is spread out too far, or how it's pulled in too tight and there's wrinkling in the material? That's not a good fit. And as we spend time kind of educating our clients on this, they start to wake up to the idea that, yeah, the shoes that they used to have were uncomfortable. It's just they just put it back in their subconscious and pushed it down, and they didn't realize. I joke with people, because it's somewhat of a true story, right? But when I was a single dad and single store owner, right, and I met Desiree, and we were dating. One day, I was like, hey, I want you to come into the store. I'm going to fit you for a pair of shoes. It's going to be my gift to you. Well, it literally is the source of our very first argument, because she didn't like what the Brannick device had to say in terms of the size of her foot. So she wanted to pick out her own shoes and get the cute ones. And even though I was like, yeah, that doesn't really fit you really well, she wasn't having it. But then if the funny thing is that it was a few weeks later, she's like, hey, these shoes are really hurting my feet. Why is that happening? And that's when I was like, well, let me take you back to what the Brannick device said. And then spent a little bit of time getting her a shoe that I thought fit her perfectly. And then after a few weeks of using that shoe and her foot pain went away, she recognized that she couldn't wear any of the shoes that were in her closet. She
Oh.
recognized that she was much more comfortable in a shoe that was properly fit, but she didn't know what that meant at the time. And so we see this all the time with clients when they come in, and they'll tell you, "Oh yeah, I'm a size 8," and in reality they need like a 9, or
Mhm.
or even a 9 wide. Um, and then we get them fitted correctly, and they're like, "Oh my god, I never knew what comfort." They didn't really understand what comfort meant, because they'd been wearing shoes that were causing them problems, and they just thought that's the way it is.
Yeah.
We do a lot of trying to educate our clients and open their minds up to new ideas about what comfortable or what a good fitting shoe really should be.
And again, offering that as a focal point of community to help the community grow, to have runners enjoy running. And I
Yeah,
think that's something that we can all get in on.
I'm going to tell you that I was deathly afraid of. I still have this innate fear of being seen as a cheesy used car salesman. I just don't want. Um, so my approach to everything when I'm working with somebody is I just don't want to be that guy, right? Just trying to make the sale, and so I've always been tried to be very humble in terms of any accomplishments that I've had in the past. because I also realized not everybody that comes into our store was training to get PRs or to try and win some race. But yeah, I do have some accomplishments worth talking about if anybody's interested.
Here we go, Jeff. Let's hit these end of podcast questions. And,
Sure.
We've learned a lot about Jeff, the Lucky Road store owner, but we haven't heard a lot about Jeff the runner. So, friends, let's learn about Jeff the runner real quick. Okay. So, Jeff, speed work or long run?
Speed work or long run? It all depends, because I have what I jokingly refer to as two running lives, right? When I was younger and competitive, speed work. I am an old, slow runner these days. So,
All right. Are you a morning or an evening runner?
I am more of a Zen runner, and I will go run when I feel like it.
All right. Do you prefer summer or winter running?
Summer. I got to admit, I'm more of a summer guy. I've got all the cold weather gear. And going to college in Michigan was never really an issue. There were days when we had sub-zero temps, and you still had to get out there and do it. I don't know, something about moving to Virginia in the late 80s. The winters here, I do not enjoy running in the wintertime in Virginia, and I can't explain why. But for me, running should be as simple as just I need a pair of shoes and a pair of shorts and head out the door. And when I was young and had a full head of hair, I didn't need a hat, but now I'm bald, so I put a hat on too.
Hey, I wear a hat just to keep my hair from falling in my face. So what's your favorite distance to race?
Back in the day, was a 5K. But it makes me think. I forget who it was. I think it was Frank Shorter. At one time said we all start out as sprinters, and our inability or our lack of speed eventually determines what distance we're good at. So every world-class marathoner started out thinking they could run the 100 meters. For me, I always thought the mile, through high school, college, I thought the mile was like the best event ever, and eventually moved up to 5Ks and 10Ks, and then Desiree and I met, and the half marathon was really the distance that we both seemed to really enjoy running together.
And finally, Jeff, as we close the show, can you give our listeners a reason to join their local run club or group?
There's multiple reasons. Here's the thing for me. Running means different things to different people. My career in running really started as a coping mechanism to try and get out of an abusive house. And it led to some really great things for me. But for me, running was a very individual activity, so that I could, not just be healthy physically, but also get my mind straight. But as I've gotten older, you keep harping on the concept of community, and there's something very beneficial to running with other people. Just getting to know other people and sharing stories and finding out that you're not the only one that, has a certain story to tell. Other people have their own stories, and coming together like a tribe like that. To me, I love running by myself, but there's times when I really do enjoy running with a group and just having the conversations and getting to hear other people's stories. And if I've got something to relate, or maybe somebody has something to relate to me, and by sharing our stories, we can help each other. Improve. And like I said, the real goal is to have a happy and healthy lifestyle.
Awesome. Thank you so much for joining.
My pleasure. Hope we can do this again.
Oh, wow. Jeff and I probably could record for hours on end talking about the run shoe industry, the run specialty industry, all of these things. There's just so much information. There's so many cool things and so many interconnected things that really play into how this run specialty store space is so much of a vital part of our running community, and how someone like Jeff has really taken what they do at Lucky Road and has formed it around people being able to run healthy, people not having to really even think about it. They can just come in if something hurts, explain it to Jeff and kind of see what it's about. But also to be able to help make sure that running is enjoyable for folks, because at the end of the day, if it's not enjoyable, you're not going to do it. He says over and over again, injured runners don't buy shoes, and there's a lot behind that. Injured runners don't buy shoes because they aren't running. And for a lot of runners, we want to be running. We don't want to be injured. And so if shoes play a big role in that, then spaces like these run specialty stores really can help to fill that gap, fill that void, to make sure that we are cared for. And when these stores think like Jeff does, then they are able to care for the community in that way. And these become such important parts of all of this. So I want to thank you for joining me in this conversation today and being a part of this community. I'd love it if you could help to support this community. It means a lot to have the support come from you, the listeners, to help this podcast to grow. And so if today's episode gave you a spark, don't forget to follow or subscribe wherever you listen to podcasts, or you can head on over to runbuildgrow.com and just find all of the episodes as well as places to connect. If you have an extra minute, make sure to jump on over to Apple Podcasts or Spotify. If you're on Apple Podcasts, leave a rating and review. Let folks know what you enjoy about this podcast, about this episode, whatever it might be. If you're on Spotify, just drop a comment in this episode. Let me know, especially what is going on with this episode and what you like about it. Simple way to help others see what is resonating with you. Let me know what's resonating with you. And if you leave a rating, if you leave a review, if you leave a shout out, comment, whatever, I will give you a shout out in the next episode because I appreciate it so much. And if you want to go that extra mile, support the podcast, keep it going strong, head on over to buymeacoffee.com/runandrev. Whether it's a one-time tip because you're a huge fan of Jeff, you're a huge fan of Lucky Road, and you want to help, like Lucky Road, to help to support this podcast and make it what it is, or you want to become a recurring monthly member and become a regular contributor to help this community grow both on and off the run. Again, I love having folks come over here, support. It lets me know that what I'm doing is worth it, and what I'm doing is definitely reaching communities far and wide. So thanks for being here and for being a part of this journey. Until next time, go crush it out there, and as always, make every mile count.